Imagine destroying a stranger's house. I mean, literally committing property damage in the middle of this crowded religious gathering.
Right.
And doing all of that just because you are absolutely convinced it's going to save your friend's life.
It's wild to think about.
It really is. So, welcome to today's deep dive. We are looking at one of the most, chaotic, rule-breaking moments in ancient texts. Because long before we had viral marketing or algorithms or PR campaigns, movements spread purely through these undeniably radical acts.
Yeah, the ultimate word of mouth.
Exactly. It wasn't polished and it definitely wasn't convenient. It was just this unstoppable word of mouth fueled by transformed lives.
And the source material we're looking at today captures that perfectly, I think. We're analyzing this historical and theological snapshot from the text of Mark chapter 2, verse 3.
Right.
It's this incredibly brief but profoundly disruptive scene where four men carry a paralyzed man to Jesus. And, on the surface, it's a story about a physical healing. But the analysis we're reviewing argues that it actually holds this revolutionary framework for understanding faith, community, and really the mechanics of intercession.
Yeah, and at first glance, the verse is just so concise. Like, it's tempting to skim right past the setup just to get to the supernatural payoff at the end.
Yeah, absolutely.
But our mission today is to slow down. We really want to deconstruct the architecture of this event because the source argues that hidden inside this seemingly simple narrative is a complete redefinition of what it actually takes to support someone when they are entirely incapable of moving forward.
Right. And to really grasp the weight of that, we have to start by setting up the physical reality of the scene.
Okay, set the stage for us.
So the setting is Capernaum. Jesus is teaching inside a private residence, which historically is believed to be the home of Peter.
Okay.
And this is during a moment of peak popularity. So the house is packed just far beyond capacity. I mean, it is a wall-to-wall claustrophobic crush of humanity in there.
Like, you can't even get close. The source paints this picture of a crowd so dense that people are literally spilling out into the courtyard, right?
Yeah, entirely blocking the entryway.
Just a total roadblock. People are probably, standing on their tiptoes, pressing against each other, just trying to catch a single word.
Exactly. And into this impenetrable, suffocating environment, our main characters arrive. These four men physically carrying another man on a mat who is completely paralyzed.
Wow. And the analysis really places a heavy emphasis on this concept of total dependency here, doesn't it?
It really does.
Yeah.
Because in the context of first-century Judea, paralysis wasn't just a physical limitation. It carried this massive social and honestly theological stigma.
Right. Illness was often seen as
A sign of divine punishment, yeah.
Yeah.
Or some kind of spiritual curse. So this man is not only physically immobilized, he's likely socially marginalized and spiritually ostracized too.
utterly helpless.
Utterly.
And that physical helplessness is such a crucial baseline for the whole narrative. Like, he couldn't just, employ a bit of willpower to get over it.
No, not at all.
If he was going to experience any kind of transformation, his autonomy had to be completely surrendered to the guys carrying him. He was 100% reliant on them.
Which totally strips away that deeply ingrained illusion of extreme self-reliance that we prize so much today.
Oh, totally. Modern culture is all about, if you just optimize your routine or consume the right podcasts.
Or just try harder, right?
Yeah, try harder and you can fix your own brokenness. But the text just immediately confronts that. It establishes that there are states of being where you simply cannot fix yourself.
Yeah, whether physical, emotional, or spiritual, you are completely immobilized.
And that translates so viscerally to our modern lives, I think. We might not be physically paralyzed on a mat, but the emotional equivalent is everywhere.
Oh, everywhere.
It's the person trapped in a really profound depression, completely unable to envision a future, or an addiction or a season of grief so dense that moving an inch feels physically impossible.
Right. And in those moments, self-help is functionally useless.
Exactly. So if the paralyzed man's total dependency is the immovable object here, then the faith of his community has to be the unstoppable force.
That's a great way to put it.
So the carriers arrive at the house, they've got all this physical and social weight on them, and they hit a literal wall of human bodies. The conventional path is totally severed.
And this introduces one of the most fascinating narrative choices in the whole text.
Yeah.
The source points out this glaring omission. Scripture never gives us the names of these four men.
That's true. We don't know who they are at all.
Right. We don't know their background, their social status, or even their specific relationship to the guy on the mat.
Yeah.
Are they his brothers, business partners, strangers?
Just 4 random guys, maybe?
The author intentionally leaves that blank.
Why do you think that is? I mean, why leave out such a huge detail?
Well, the source argues that this anonymity serves a brilliant literary and theological purpose.
Mm.
By stripping away their specific biographical details, the text turns them into a universal archetype.
Oh, I see.
Their identity is entirely swallowed up by their action. So it forces the reader to focus exclusively on the nature of their faith.
And the nature of that faith is wildly disruptive.
Yeah.
Because faced with this blocked path, they just refuse to accept the physical limitations of the environment.
Yeah, they don't give up.
A normal, rational response to that crowd would be to, set the mat down, assess the situation, and be like, well, let's try again tomorrow.
Yeah, they could have easily justified turning back.
Yeah.
And yielding to that difficulty would have been the socially acceptable choice.
Right.
But instead, they do something that completely redefines faith. They take it from this passive internal belief system into an aggressive external force. They decide to bypass the crowd by taking the man up onto the roof.
Okay, let's talk about the mechanics of that for a second, because the source delves into what a first-century Palestinian roof actually looked like.
Right, it wasn't a modern roof.
No, these weren't structures with convenient access hatches. They were typically made of thick wooden beams overlaid with this dense matrix of branches, packed mud, and clay.
It's just solid earth, basically.
Exactly. So to create a hole large enough to lower a human body through, they literally had to dig, claw, and dismantle a solid structure.
They are committing active, deliberate property damage.
Yes.
And doing so carries a massive social cost. First century Middle Eastern culture was deeply rooted in this honor and shame dynamic.
Oh, right.
To deface someone's property, especially while a highly respected rabbi is teaching a packed room beneath that very roof, it's an act of profound social disruption. It's brazen, it's loud, and it is messy.
The conviction required to do that is just staggering to me. They had to believe so fiercely that an encounter with Jesus would result in a miracle. They were willing to take on the financial cost, the social outrage, the sheer physical exhaustion.
Digging through clay is no joke.
Right. It just paints a picture of faith that isn't polite or patient at all. It forces an opening where the environment says there isn't one.
Just picture the sensory reality of that moment inside the house. Jesus is teaching. The room is probably dead silent as people listen. And suddenly, debris just starts raining down on the crowd.
Dust everywhere.
Yeah, sunlight pierces this dim room. The roof is torn open, and these 4 exhausted guys slowly lower a paralyzed man on a mat directly into the center of the gathering.
Just interrupting everything.
Completely.
And this brings us to the absolute crux of the source's analysis. This is where the story takes a massive theological twist.
Right.
The paralyzed man is lowered into the room. He's face to face with the person who supposedly has the power to change his reality. And yet the text records absolute silence from him.
Not a single word.
We don't know his inner monologue. We don't know if he was desperate for a miracle or profoundly embarrassed by the spectacle.
The author gives him no dialogue and no expression of personal belief at all.
So what triggers the miracle?
Well, the text hinges entirely on a specific phrase. It says, when Jesus saw their faith.
Their faith. Plural.
Plural. The divine response is not triggered by the man on the mat. It's triggered by the 4 guys peering through the hole they just tore in the ceiling.
See, I have to push back on the implications of this a bit because it feels like it violates a core tenet of modern belief.
How so?
Well, we are so conditioned to view faith as this intensely personal, individualized thing. It's supposed to be about personal agency, my choice, my spiritual journey. How can a healing happen based on someone else's faith?
Right.
Doesn't that bypass the agency of the paralyzed man completely? What if he didn't even want to be there?
And that tension is exactly what makes this passage so radical. The source addresses this by contrasting our modern Western hyper-individualism with the communal mindset of the ancient Near East.
Okay.
In that culture, the individual was inextricably linked to their community. But on a deeper theological level, this scene establishes the mechanism of intercession not as a violation of agency, but as a spiritual proxy.
A spiritual proxy. That's a fascinating term. It's almost like a form of spiritual collateral.
Yeah, exactly.
Like when your own spiritual credit score is entirely zeroed out and you lack the capacity to believe or act for yourself, these 4 men step in and co-sign the loan. They leverage their own faith to grant you access.
That is a highly accurate way to frame it.
Yeah.
And it completely redefines our modern kind of watered down concept of intercession.
Because today, intercession is usually just, adding a name to a prayer list.
Right, polite thoughts and prayers. But the Greek and Hebrew roots of intercessory concepts imply a heavy physical standing in the gap. It literally means inserting yourself between a person and their limitation.
Wow. It requires substituting your own active belief for their profound inability.
Yes, the four men didn't demand that the guy demonstrate sufficient theological understanding before they picked him up.
They didn't make him prove he was worthy.
Exactly. They acted purely because they believed in the power of the person they were bringing him to. By bearing his physical weight and offering their collective faith, they essentially created an environment where grace could operate.
That is the highest form of community, isn't it?
It really is.
Yeah.
The source emphasizes that there are seasons in the human experience where a person's faith will inevitably fracture or just evaporate completely.
Yeah.
And in those moments, the community is required to literally believe on their behalf.
The responsibility inherent in that is just staggering. It demands a level of spiritual vigilance that is incredibly demanding. Like, you aren't just responsible for your own journey.
Right.
You're expected to monitor the margins of your community, looking for the people who lack the strength to walk.
Which provides the perfect transition into the modern application the source pivots toward.
Yeah, how does this actually apply to us?
Well, the text moves from this historical breakdown into a direct mandate for the reader today. It argues that the archetype of the four anonymous men is a calling.
So the analysis is essentially asking you to run a diagnostic on your own social circles.
Exactly. It posits that we are surrounded by people who are functionally paralyzed by doubt, trauma, shame, or just the sheer complexity of modern life.
You're stuck.
Stuck and unable to navigate toward healing on their own. And the challenge here is not to casually hope they eventually find their way.
Because they probably can't.
Right. The mandate is to actively become the carriers, to identify the hindrances preventing them from finding wholeness, and to intentionally dismantle those barriers.
I want to examine the reality of what that mandate actually demands, though, because the source includes this striking observation. It says, love finds a way where convenience fails. And that is a beautiful sentence, but the practical application of it sounds inherently inconvenient.
It demands friction.
Yes. Fiction, which is the exact opposite of how our society is structured today.
Yeah.
We engineer our lives to eliminate friction.
Everything is about convenience.
We want our relationships neatly scheduled. We want our commitments to fit within a specific time block. But true intercession, the kind that tears through a roof, is violently inconvenient.
It is. The men in the story had to abandon whatever they had planned for that day. They burned massive physical calories carrying a human body.
And they willingly absorbed the social fallout of interrupting a prominent religious figure.
Exactly. And interceding for someone in the modern world carries a similar tangible cost. It means sacrificing your own social capital to stand beside someone who is isolated.
It might mean, spending your weekend sitting in silence with a friend whose grief makes them terrible company.
Yeah, or expending your own financial resources to remove a practical barrier. Paying for a therapy session, covering a bill, taking on a burden that disrupts your own carefully curated peace.
To participate in the kind of love demonstrated in Capernaum, you basically have to embrace the mess. You have to be willing to look foolish and to dismantle the metaphorical roofs keeping people trapped.
The source confronts the reader with the reality that true compassion is never a passive emotional state. It's a disruptive physical action.
There is a critical psychological boundary that the source clarifies here, though, and I think this is so important because it prevents this whole mandate from becoming toxic.
Oh, you mean about not being the savior?
Yes. When you become the carrier, you are not acting as the savior. You are not responsible for curing the paralysis.
That distinction is vital to prevent burnout and codependency, really.
The four men possessed absolutely no medical ability to heal a severed spinal cord. If they had believed it was their job to fix the man, they would have failed instantly.
Their only responsibility, their only capability was transportation.
Transportation. They carried the mat, they broke through the barrier, and they dropped him at the feet of the one who actually possessed the power to restore him.
Bringing someone into the presence of healing requires profound humility. You bring them in love, you support their weight, but you must completely relinquish the outcome.
You trust that a power greater than your own good intentions will do the actual restorative work. Your job is just the heavy lifting of access.
The transformation is entirely out of your hands.
Synthesizing all of these elements reveals a text that aggressively challenges the isolation of modern spirituality. It demands that we view our own strength and resources not as private assets to be hoarded, but as tools specifically designed to be leveraged for the paralyzed people in our proximity.
It redefines intercession as an action verb. Transformative love is a relentless force that refuses to look at a crowded room or a complex problem and simply give up.
It is a phenomenal framework to extract from just a few short sentences of ancient text.
Truly.
The call to be one of those anonymous carriers bearing the weight of someone else's immobility is a heavy, sacred responsibility. But as we bring this deep dive to a close, the source material invites a final, deeply personal perspective shift.
Yeah, this is the part that really sticks with you.
It really does,
Yeah.
because throughout this analysis, the focus has heavily trended toward the mandate to be the strong ones, the carriers tearing through the roof. But consider the reality of your own timeline. At some point in your life, you are not the one carrying the mat. Whether you had the self-awareness to recognize it in the moment or not, there was a season where you were the silent, paralyzed person in the story,
Stuck and devoid of options.
entirely dependent on forces outside of your control to pull you out of the dark. So the question shifts from who you need to carry to who carried you.
Who are the anonymous people in your life who quietly absorbed your weight when you lacked the strength to walk?
Whose borrowed faith acted as your spiritual collateral when your own belief was completely bankrupt? And what metaphorical roofs did they have to tear through? What profound inconveniences did they willingly endure just to drop you in a place where you could finally be healed?
Recognizing our own historical moments of total dependency is incredibly grounding. It strips away our pride, and it often provides the exact empathetic fuel required to finally pick up the mat for someone else.
It is the ultimate cycle of grace. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep looking for those roofs to tear through.